All right, now to the latest on plans to bring the Commanders to the Commonwealth. The Virginia House of Delegates Committee advanced a bill that would create a stadium authority. It's basically a group that will be responsible for financing and building that new stadium. The bill now goes to the full House of Delegates. And obviously, Virginia lawmakers hope a new stadium brings a huge economic boost. But today, business experts told WUSA 9 that's not necessarily guaranteed. Chief investigative reporter Eric Flack is live outside of Nats Park in Southeast tonight. And Flack, that area has seen a complete transformation since Nats Park opened up, but that really didn't happen overnight. It took a while.
It did, Zoe, and as a DC kid who grew up here, it is still remarkable to come down to Navy Yard and see what it has become, but it didn't happen overnight. In fact, the economic explosion here was actually slowed by the recession. And today, experts told us that when it comes to the potential economic impact of a new football stadium, that is even harder to predict. You talked about Nats Park and the incredible development we've finally seen there. Same thing happened with MCI Center, now Capital One. Do we expect the same will happen with a new football stadium?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
And a difficult one to answer for George Mason University business professor George Perry, who worked as a sports marketing executive for 23 years, including more than a year with the then Washington Redskins.
Because if you're a restaurant or a hotel, you can't depend on 10 football games and a dozen or half a dozen concerts that can fill an 80,000 seat stadium to run your business. Whereas if you're a hockey arena or a basketball arena in the city and there's 60 plus games there, or baseball where there's 80 plus games, and it's easy to get there if you're not going for games, you're going for concerts, then I think it's easier to build up that business around the stadium.
There are examples of football stadiums spurring growth, like the New England Patriots Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which now sits adjacent to Patriot Place, a bustling 1.3 million square foot retail megacenter. The type of development Maryland leaders hope to see spring up around FedEx Field, but never did.
But I do remember when I worked there, if you're in Ashburn, right, and you want to go to lunch or go to a restaurant or do anything, very easy to do that. That was where the practice facility is. Whenever I had to work at the stadium during the week, I mean, where did I go? There was nothing there.
Yeah, and that certainly is not the problem here at Nats Park. You know, Perry told me that an economic boom with a new stadium is always a safer bet if it's in an urban area, or at least the infrastructure and public transportation is already in place at Nats Park. Remember, the Metro is literally right down the street. That is something that is likely not going to be the case if the Commanders decide to stay somewhere in Maryland or move to Virginia. So,
yeah, and Flack, a lot of whether or not the new stadium is a good deal really depends largely on how much taxpayer money goes into it, right?
Yeah, and keep in mind, FedEx Field, which is universally agreed upon as a disaster, was not a huge weight on taxpayers. The old owner, Jack Kent Cook, paid for most of FedEx Field. Maryland taxpayers were on the hook for about $70 million, which does sound like a lot of money, but when you're talking about these huge stadiums, pretty reasonable about. We'll see what happens with the Commanders. So.
All right, yeah, we will. Flack, thank you.